So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Employer Insights, Attracting and Retaining Life Sciences Talent. My name is Carolyn Lee, and I'm a business development and industry strategist with the University of Waterloo Cooperative Education. I'm pleased to be here partnered with Life Sciences Ontario to guide a very important discussion about talent in the life sciences industry today. All industries have experienced significant talent challenges over the past few years while navigating a global pandemic. So today we're going to talk specifically about life sciences talent, employer strategies, and potential solutions, and specifically student talent. Before we proceed with introductions, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm presenting today from the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. As we come together today while staying apart, I also acknowledge that we are gathering on other traditional lands across the country. Thank you. So one housekeeping item before we get started. I just want to mention that if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. I think you can see it probably at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom screen. And we will leave some time at the end of the session for our panelists to answer these. So we have a lot of content to cover today, so I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists for today. First up is Joanne Jordan. Joanne is the Manager of Business Development and Partnerships with BioTalent Canada, where she is the point of contact in maintaining a relationship with the partners and partners members. She holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Queen's University and was part of Women in STEM. With over 10 years experience in board management, fundraising, and event planning, she also worked with 2 startups in Ottawa and was recently appointed Chief Operating Officer for an online marketing platform promoting local shopping, and has also worked as a co-host with Rogers TV. So welcome, Joanne. Can you give us a little bit more information about BioTalent Canada and all the great work being done by the BioTalent team?
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. I'm really happy to be here. To sum it up in one sentence or less, BioTalent Canada, essentially we support the life sciences by breaking down barriers between talent and employers to help move the industry forward. So talent of all shapes and sizes, from students to internationally educated professionals to recent graduates, we try to make those barriers broken down so that employers can hire them and talent can get to the jobs they need in the life sciences.
Fantastic. Very pleased to have you here, Joanne. Next up is Jeannie Barbu. Jeannie is a human resource professional with over 20 years of experience in both large global organizations as well as successful scale-ups. She has worked in the service, tech, and biotechnology industries. And over the course of her career, she has worked for KPMG, OpenText, ApplyBoard, and is currently the Senior Director of People and Culture at Nicoya. At Nicoya, Jeannie is responsible for leading the HR functions, including the development and integration of strong, scalable HR practices, programs, and processes. So welcome, Jeannie, and thank you for being here. Can you also take a few minutes and tell us a little bit more about the great work that Nicoya is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So our product helps scientists in drug discovery. That's our mission, is to be able to improve human life by helping scientists succeed. I've just landed here in May, so I've only been here for a few months, but we've done some really great work internally. In the short time that I've been here, lucky to work with a fantastic leadership team that supports the initiatives that we are rolling out and the things that we're looking at internally.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. And our last panelist today is Dr. Trevor Charles. Dr. Charles is the founder and CEO and CSO of Metagenome Bio, the executive director of the Liftoff Black Entrepreneurship Program, director of the Waterloo Centre for Microbial Research, and professor of biology at the University of Waterloo. He was trained as a microbiologist and bacterial geneticist with a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from the University of British Columbia, PhD in molecular biology from McMaster University, and postdoc from the University of Washington. He has held faculty positions at both McGill University and the University of Waterloo, and his work is situated within the context of the circular bioeconomy. So thank you for being here, Dr. Charles, and representing both the faculty perspective on this topic in addition to your employer perspective. Please take a few minutes here to share some information about some of the great work you're doing and some of the projects that you're leading.
Great, thanks, Carolyn, and happy to be involved in this important conversation. I just wanted to highlight a few things that we do both in our companies and also in my research group. One of the things that a lot of people might have heard of recently is we are one of the labs that sequences wastewater to find different COVID variants of concern. And you know that this is a really active thing that we're doing, especially in the province of Ontario. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. But related to what we were talking about today, we actually hire a number of recent graduates, mostly from the biology program at Waterloo, to carry out that work. Other work that we do is bacterial genome engineering for production of bioplastics. And then also we do work on plant microbiome. So how do you get microbes to get plants to grow better?
Great, thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions about some of the work that you're doing. That's great. So to start out, I'm going to look to Joanne first to kind of set the stage for us. BioTalent Canada recently completed a comprehensive labor market intelligence study called the Close-Up on the Bioeconomy. Joanne, there were some really great insights and discoveries in this study. Can you give us a high-level overview of some of the talent insights in particular?
Yes, thank you very much, Carolyn. We actually have, I believe it's 11 reports that we did on the labor market research. And most of this research was actually performed before the pandemic had really taken its full effect. So I did actually bring some papers to get my statistics correct, but it was really very eye-opening that overall, currently the industry is seeing a 2-to-1 shortage for talent to job openings, with an expected 4-to-1 skills gap, talent gap by the year 2029. The current estimates say that we have about 65,000 workers shortage, mostly in the biomanufacturing and processing fields. So a real eye-opener to know that we're pandemic excluded, going into a real situation, and then the pandemic has, of course, exacerbated that situation. Some other really key facts that have come out from that labor market study is that roughly only 1/3 of the members in the bioeconomy are women. Not only that, visible minorities make up an average of only 20%, with IEPs at 17% and recent immigrants at only 9%. And more important for this week especially is Indigenous workers and workers with disabilities make up only 1% of the bioeconomy workforce. So some work that we really need to do overall in industry. And speaking more about the labor market issues is employers are actually reporting that they have a 40% lack of qualified candidates and that they're requiring more specialized skill sets. So it's really fascinating with BioTalent Canada having done that kind of research. You may have seen our national strategy, our national talent strategy. So what we do at BioTalent Canada, when I mentioned we break down barriers, is we collect all of this information so we are able to identify the skills gaps, but then we do other projects like the National Occupational Standards, which then document the competencies and the transferable skills. That is very valuable information for both employers and talent to know that they're speaking the same language and able to promote themselves and ask for the right talent. So that's one way of breaking down the barriers. Also, through this labor market research, we're able to see what kind of competencies are missing, such as skills. So we've developed 2 sets of online courses that we can talk about a little bit later, being the Skills for Success and the Technical Skills Fundamentals. And then we also perform skills recognitions. So we'll be working towards accreditation and certification to try to continue to move the industry forward and support that whole talent management aspect of what we're doing here in the industry.
That's great, Joanne. There's so many great reports coming from BioTalent Canada. And while I did say we'd leave the questions till the end, we do have a question that asked, where can we get a copy of these stats?
Yeah, absolutely. They are on the BioTalent Canada website, and I'll put in a link directly to that particular tab shortly after this meeting, or after this speaking point.
Great, thanks, Joanne.
My pleasure.
So in keeping this information in mind, my next question is for Jeannie. And so considering the current and upcoming talent shortage in the life sciences industry, which Joanne mentioned, a lot of this information was even pre-pandemic. What are some of the strategies that Nicoya is employing or is intending to employ when it comes to attracting talent and positioning Nicoya as an employer of choice? Oh, you're muted, Jeannie. It's it's the Zoom life.
Somebody had to do it first, right?
Yes.
Of course, I'll take this. So Nicoya is in a really unique, like a niche environment, and our Open SPR is the world's only benchtop SPR instrument. And so if you're in this vertical, you probably already know who we are. However, our strategy really is about building a win-win environment, right? An environment where people actually feel valued, where they feel like their voice is heard, where they feel like they belong. So we've done a lot of work since I've got here, just listening to the employee voice, right? Listening to what are the gaps, what are they looking for, what is important to them, right? And one thing that has come out is absolutely people are behind us and behind what our mission is. And again, like our mission is to improve human life by just helping scientists succeed. The people who work here are not necessarily looking to make the next shiny object. They're really looking, right, to make a difference, to make a change. And I think that's so important to people. They are enthusiastic, they want to learn. So one of the things that we are focusing on right now is really what can we do in order to foster that growth and development within both our managers and within our individual contributors. So we do have a program that we will be running for our managers to help them develop into stronger leaders. And we will have a reimbursement program for our individual contributors to be able to go out and extend their training and get additional external development that fits their particular career path that they're looking at and their current role. We are also looking at implementing a career discussion program where we will sit down with every individual throughout the organization and their manager to understand what is their ultimate career path and how can Nicoya help to support them getting there. It doesn't necessarily mean we're a scale-up company, we're a small company. It doesn't mean that we may have that ultimate job here today for them. But again, let's make this a win-win situation where we are getting the most out of our employees while they're here, and we are contributing to their success in their hopefully long career journey, so that when they look back, they will say, you know, Nicoya was probably the best company that I work for.
Those are all really great ideas. And I think, you know, to touch a little bit on the, you know, the work that you do and that it matters. You know, we have a research arm within cooperative education at Waterloo called the Work Learn Institute. And one of our recent studies was surveying students about what matters to them in their work. And it was really a values perspective in that we know that students really want to care about the work that they're doing. It's not necessarily just about the tasks and job responsibilities, but that the entire mission of their employer really matters to them. So as an employer, this is something that really does position you as an employer of strength to focus on that work.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think there's been a little bit of a shift. I mean, there's still always going to be that drive for that next title or for that next role, but it's much deeper rooted than that, right? It's not about me, it's about what I give out, right? And it's about the legacy that they leave, right? And I'll get into that a little bit more too, because that's part of why Nicoya looks at the co-op program. It is about our legacy and the legacy that we leave, but it's a really important, and there's been study after study just showing that employees' values need to align with the company values, and we take that really seriously when we are looking at just in our communications, in the programs that we set up, and how we actually support whether it's our co-ops or our employees, because we don't really treat our co-ops any differently than our full-time employees. We want them to have that experience, and we don't want them to ever feel like they're just a co-op, right? It's really important for them to be able to come in and have that same sense of achievement and accomplishment in the time that they're here with us.
That's great. Thank you. I just wanted to go back to one of the points that that Joanne mentioned, and I have a question for Dr. Trevor Charles. Some recent BioTalent Canada employer surveys indicated that there's a need for candidates with specialized technical and research skills who also understand the broader business context. From the academic perspective, what is academia doing to ensure they're preparing future talent for whether it be co-op jobs or even post-graduation employment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, first, I'd like to start off by saying that we're a big fan of the BioTalent internships. So both in our company and at the university, we hire a lot of the people that end up staying with our company initially through BioTalent. So I think a real strength of the university systems, not only University of Waterloo, is that students are trained as generalists, right? So they gain a broad understanding of a topic area or several topic areas, and we know that biology is very complex. But at the same time, they have a lot of opportunities through co-op, through internships, through fourth-year projects, through different volunteer possibilities, or even through some of the student clubs. I'm thinking of the iGEM, if some of you know, the synthetic biology team. And this really provides an excellent mix of both that general, broad knowledge and also the hard skills that are very specific. And I think those are the types of people that really do well. And they are also able to adapt to different situations. So just as an example, I'll use a pandemic example. Early in the pandemic, people were wondering, could we actually do surveillance of wastewater to find, what the levels of the virus are in the general population? There was nobody who was specialized in that area. And yet around the world, including in Ontario and other parts of Canada, mostly university teams, it wasn't industry, it wasn't the private sector that did it, it was mostly universities that were able to adapt what they knew about wastewater, about qPCR, about sequencing that had never been applied in this way before, and very quickly were able to develop something that had real value for society. And it continues to this day and is being expanded. So, I think really we need to always keep in sight that, those skills that you gain in one area, you could apply them in another area. And you can really take advantage of that if you have a general understanding, a general knowledge of the area that allows you to see and recognize what those opportunities are.
Great. No, thank you for that. And so taking what Trevor was just describing here, Jeannie, the skills that students develop during school are one part of the picture. Like Trevor mentioned, a lot of the knowledge that students gain at school is a little more general. So when you're hiring students, how important is the onboarding for your co-op students, and what does that training entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the onboarding, again, regardless whether it's co-op or full-time, is so critically important, right? It's one of the leading indicators of how long a person will actually stay and their level of satisfaction with an organization. The skills that they learn are important, yes, but it's about, our job is about being able to help them now transition those skills into the real world. When we bring somebody in as a co-op, there's a couple of different layers of our onboarding. So they have their typical HR onboarding where we go through some of the basics, but we also make sure that we walk through marketing, just our brand, our logos, like just how to use some of that information. We walk through our quality processes and our quality systems because that's intensely important to us. We walk through our product training so that they understand what our product is. we assign them a new hire ambassador, or we will be shortly. We're launching that, where they are paired up with somebody who's not their manager, where they have the comfort level to be able to go and ask that question maybe a third time because they forgot, right? So that they're actually developing and coming up to speed very quickly. And then we get down into the departmental onboarding levels, right? And so for R&D, just for an example, they would have a lot of training just around our quality systems and our quality process. We've got documents to go through, and then they're quizzed on that. And they have to pass before they kind of move on to the next piece. But we have technical guides, and we have tech protocol, and we have SOPs, and so we have lots and lots of different ways for them to be able to learn. In their first week, they're kind of learning on their own. In their second week, they actually shadow a scientist and like sit through a test. By the third week, they're starting to get up to speed, and they'll eventually be given their own test to be able to set up, and they will set that up from beginning to end, but with somebody there, obviously, to ask questions, or for them to ask questions of, and to be able to guide them. And we also have different webinars just on the different types of interactions that you would see with our cartridges, how to use our product, how to analyze the data that comes out of that. So we have a very robust onboarding program because, again, the whole drive behind that is to be able to get them up and running, to be able to intensify their learning as much as we can in the time that they're here with us, so that they leave with a much better, robust breadth of knowledge than what they came in with.
Well, that's great. And I think, the message I'm hearing being, to go back to what Trevor had said, they're coming in with kind of more generalist skills. Depending on how you're recruiting, it's really that training needs to be intentional to allow the students to fulfill what they can do for your organization. And I think having a very comprehensive onboarding program, at least for the first couple of weeks, really does allow the students to have that space to learn and be able to jump into their role as soon as possible and be able to contribute. And that's what students want too. So no, that's great. So speaking a little more about student skills, at the University of Waterloo, co-op students are required to take a certain number of professional development courses from the University of Waterloo to complement their training. Students are also encouraged to access professional development opportunities externally as well. So my question is to Joanne, does BioTalent Canada provide any professional development courses or any programs? And if so, how are they being utilized by employers, students, and even mature candidates?
Yeah, excellent question, Carolyn, and thank you for the shout out, Jeannie and Trevor. We appreciate organizations such as yourselves advocating for the student work placement program. But to answer your question specifically, Carolyn, absolutely, we do have training programs, as I mentioned earlier, and it's ironic. Based on that labor market intelligence we spoke about earlier, two of the courses we have, one is skills for success, or the essential skills, and the other one is the technical skills fundamentals. But we did develop the skills for success because it's actually it's across all industries. 45% of workers do not possess the essential skills to advance their career. So we're not alone in the bioeconomy and life sciences industry. But with that said, yes, absolutely. BioTalent Canada has the two sets of courses that we have, and we have attached them with our student work placement program. So any student and employer who access the student work placement program together, the student has access to both sets of courses throughout their tenure with that organization. And much like Jeannie was saying earlier, we believe it's not just a co-op. It's about something you need to do with onboarding. It's about something you need to do to further their career, because it's not just this one co-op role that could last 4 months or 8 months or onwards, but it's to help further their career and their advancements down the road. So specifically, the courses that we have were designed for industry, by industry, which means that we had employers such as Nicoya, for example, post-secondary institutions, subject matter experts, all involved in the design of these courses. The skills for success originally were 5 courses. Now we have added 3 more, so it's 8, including the introduction to the bioeconomy, and it incorporates the fundamentals, right? So reading, writing, numeracy, document use, and now communication, collaboration, and problem solving. And don't be fooled by thinking these are fundamentals that anybody has, because it actually, one of the master's professors that's helped us design these courses said that over 40%, there's an exact figure, I can't remember what it is, but over 40% of his master's students couldn't perform the mathematical equations needed to go from the school, the classroom, to the workforce. So don't be fooled by, terms like essential skills, fundamentals. And then the technical skills fundamentals also include scientific report writing, which is a prerequisite because it includes things like Jeannie said, the SOPs, and then the ability to take the other courses, which is good manufacturing, good lab, good clinical practices, as well as QA and QC. And these courses are available in both French and English, and they have the closed captioning option as well to enforce the adult learner's expectations. They have the pre-assessment, the knowledge checks throughout the actual lesson plan themselves, and then a post-assessment, giving the learner, assuming they get the 80% passing mark, a certificate of bioreadiness in either of those 12 topics that I mentioned. So it's really fantastic. And much like Jeannie said, when she mentioned onboarding, I thought that was quite cute, because I actually encourage employers to use these skills courses as part of the onboarding process, put them in the employee file, get the student engaged in these kinds of processes, because it's only going to benefit them in that particular role, but also down the road.
That's great, Joanne. And I'm familiar with these courses as well. And I know of some students who have taken them who have said it really did complement their academics and training quite well. So yes, definitely that's great that those have been developed for that purpose. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happened over the last couple of years. And historically, we've seen that first and second year students sometimes lack the experience that employers are asking for when they're recruiting. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of in-person jobs decreased, including those research and development and laboratory jobs for co-op students. So now we are hearing that many upper year science students have shared that they also do not necessarily have the laboratory experience that employers are now looking for. So my first question is, the question is going to Jeannie, but as an employer, how do you navigate this issue? And do you have any insights into how employers should be addressing this skills gap when recruiting?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's kind of both sides, right? So from the employer side, from Nicoya's lens, it's really about, it's not always about fulfilling like the labor aspect, right? It's about leaving the legacy, right? And how do we actually, we are in a great opportunity to be able to impact those students' lives and career paths, right? And so it's really about giving them that chance. I think everybody on this panel, probably everybody on this call, can think back to a person or a job where it opened up that opportunity to set them on the path for where they are today, right? And so we don't necessarily want to look at the lack that the students have had over the last few years because of COVID and the way they've had to learn. Instead, we embrace it as an opportunity, right? Because they may not have lab experience, but they would learn more lab experience here. They'd have more lab experience here in a week, right, than what they might in an entire semester in school. And it also allows us to not have to undo a lot of the learning that they've learned, because we have our own processes, we have our own protocols, right? So if I was a student, I wouldn't necessarily be as concerned with that. And I also think from an employer perspective, you just have to shift your mindset a little bit when you're looking at those students, because we look at the skills, we've looked at what they've learned for sure. We look at past jobs that they've had or past co-op positions, but we also look at, are they able to problem solve? What is their attitude? We can teach them in the lab, right? But the enthusiasm, the eagerness to learn, the curiosity, the attitude that they bring to the table is far more important from our aspect than what they've actually maybe learned, because we can teach them and we can guide them through that. And you're dealing with students who think that this is their field of choice, but they don't actually know, right? Until they actually get out there and are hands-on, right? And so that's where we come into play, right? Is to be that guide, to be that coach, to be that mentor. And if they get in here and they see something else that they think, oh, that kind of looks interesting, we'll do our best to be able to accommodate that, right? Yeah, it's just about having a bit of a more open mind in terms of what these students are coming in with, and looking at the opportunity for both the student and the employer, versus looking at just what they don't have or what they're lacking.
And I think that that's a really interesting piece, that this is something we see across industries. We see that it's the soft skills or the motivation or the passion can't be taught necessarily, but the skills can be.
That's right.
So no, that's great. And to take that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and just while you were saying that, because I think, you know, when you look at even from a diversity perspective, right, it's about bringing everybody in and giving them that opportunity, right? But again, if they can show up with that eagerness to learn and the teachability and the attitude, that is, I think, what's going to get them much further than just what their marks might show.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. So my next question, just to take this a little further, to Trevor, but so co-op is obviously one way that students specialize their skills. But in this situation where maybe those opportunities weren't available or there were fewer available, what other opportunities are there for students to build their experience and access these high quality, either co-op jobs or also full-time jobs after graduation?
Great, thanks. Yeah, this is a good opportunity really to emphasize the importance of hands-on experience. So this would be experience that, you know, you don't get in a lecture, you don't get it in a teaching lab, but, you know, you could get it through volunteer work that you do in a lab, through a fourth-year project that you do, through work study. And in many ways, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, as long as you're in the lab and you're working towards your 5,000 or 10,000 hours. You know, those people who have those hours, which really do amount to something incredibly important. I mean, it allows you to have almost a sixth sense when you're in a research lab, or if you're in, you know, an R&D lab, or, you know, even a commercial facility. You recognize, you know, different things about that environment that those without the experience would not be able to. So, you know, for any students out there in the audience, I would say, you know, look for the different opportunities that might be a little bit hidden, right? So at the University of Waterloo, we have work study programs for both international and domestic students that allow you to work as, you know, 10 hours a week, and you get paid for that. And then there are also a number of other fourth-year projects and capstone projects and that sort of thing that can really get you on the way to becoming, to developing the expertise, the hands-on expertise that you need to succeed and really be highly regarded in the marketplace.
And I think on that point, there is also the, you know, the student education side at the institution, being that helping students articulate these skills to potential employers if they are accessing, you know, work study or other opportunities to get these skills, to be able to articulate those through their resume and through interviews is another piece that is the institution's responsibility in helping students do that. So I think we always encourage students to just be that proactive and look for those opportunities where they can, and relay that to potential employers as best they can as well. So
I was going to say on that note, Carolyn,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
as a word to note, I mentioned earlier the national occupational standards that we have just come out with. I believe it's 51 or 52. And of course, going with the shortage of 65,000 in biomanufacturing, you know, a kind of a need there. But we're
Mhm.
actually incorporating the national occupational standards into not just our job board, but into our resume builder. So that going forward, not today, but as we push that through and put that out onto our program, will actually help students with that, exactly what you said, translating their skills and translating their transferable skills to employers. So just something to keep in the back of your minds.
Right. No, thanks for that, Joanne. I have another question for Jeannie. So now let's talk about some specific work that students are doing. So organizations will use student talent to develop a pipeline for future full-time employees or to fulfill short-term project needs. What are the types of roles you're recruiting students for, and how do they fit into your overall talent strategy?
Yeah, so again, we are scaling. So anybody familiar with that kind of environment, we don't necessarily know our needs change and can change quite rapidly. Right now, we're really excited to have 6 co-ops in place, actually. So we have a financial analyst, we have a financial intern, so something outside of the science world. We have 2 that are in the microfluidics assay integration intern role. We have a research assistant, and we have the software hardware engineering intern. So those are typically some of the roles that we have seen cycled through, but we've also had a user experience research intern in the mix as well. So every time we have a cohort like go through, that really helps us in our brand, right? Because they may not be ready, depending on which term they're in, they may not be ready for full-time hire, and we may not be ready. But the better that we can help to develop them, and the more fulfilling experience that we can provide to them, the likelihood of them wanting to come back to us is greater, right? Because they're either going to come to us or potentially a competitor, and I'd rather them come to us if we have that opportunity for them. So it's really about giving that really great experience for the students that are here with us. And even if it's a year or 2 years out and they want to come back, that's fantastic, right? Yeah, so in terms of just a long-term strategy, our strategy can shift, our strategy can change, and it's a little bit hit and miss sometimes in terms of do the stars align when the student is ready to come on full-time, and do we have a position for them, right? But for us, it's also, again, just about making that really fantastic opportunity and experience while they're here, so that it is a place that they would look to come back to.
That's great. And we do always say that's the best case scenario if a student has a co-op work term with an employer they end up working for after graduation. But it's still a success, even if students are just exploring. But it is great to hear when that does happen. So a similar question over to Trevor. For your projects, what work are the co-op students doing, and does that work differentiate between graduate students and the co-op students, and how do those students work together?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen in the last number of years is an emphasis on research projects that are partnerships between private sector and universities. And these are often not well suited to graduate student projects. And that's really where the strength of the co-op students come in. So typically in our lab, if we have one of these partnership grants, we need to meet milestones, and it's pretty important that we get what we need to get done in a timely manner, and that's really where the co-op students come into play. There's often a large volume of work that needs to be done that can be overseen by graduate students, but they will typically have their own thesis projects that would have priority, especially in terms of the hands-on. And so we find that the co-op students really invaluable for that. Another area I think that we have really found them useful is for computational work. So computational work is it's getting more and more important in biology, and we in the past have hired a lot of co-op students from math, from computer science, and that sort of thing. They made really important contributions to our program.
Well, that's great. It's great to hear that relationship between graduates. I think that co-op students can learn a lot from graduate students, and so that's great to hear. So I think that we have time for another question, last question, I guess, for Joanne. And so we've already touched on this a little bit, but when talking to employers who have never hired co-op students, we do sometimes hear concerns that the cost to hire is too high when they only stay for 4 to 8 months. We have already discussed today how co-op students can enhance an organization's talent pipeline, and that students really do make a positive impact quickly. However, to address that cost concern, can you talk a little bit more about the funding programs that BioTalent Canada administers? You touched on the student work placement program and maybe any other programs that are available for employers.
Yeah, my pleasure, Carolyn. Yeah, I always, when I'm talking about the programs that we have here at BioTalent Canada, I say for the student or for the talent, it always gives them that opportunity of on-the-job training, which can be invaluable. But then also, as Jeannie was mentioning, you know, she's shaping the future of her own workforce by taking on these opportunities as well. And so going back to her point about it goes further than the marks show, then absolutely any kind of program is fantastic for a talent like a recent grad or a student to say, not only am I fantastic, here's my resume, but I also come with a wage subsidy. So doing your homework when you're looking for a job is essential in getting yourself into that door. And then to answer your question more specifically, Carolyn, absolutely, 4 months is not too short for a student to take on a job. We've had many examples of students taking on roles, even just for a 4-month period. I have one example of a young student who won the Catalyst Award back in 2020, where she took the app that she was developing from analyzation stage to piloting stage to software beta stage in just 4 months. So you should never, you know, look at it as a short period of time, but look at it as an opportunity. Maybe not the longest one you want, but it works quite nicely. So those kinds of opportunities, and also for employers, sometimes when it is competitive trying to attract talent and you're competing for co-op students, having access to the funding can actually offer that student a higher salary so you can gain the student that you're looking for, right? Because you're able to subsidize some of their funding. So for employers, absolutely, 4 months is not too short. You can also apply for longer periods of time, depending on the academic year and the academic institution. Students can come on for every 4-month period is a new application, because that's how the government funding is set up. But a student can stay with an employer for 4 months, 8 months, 12. I've seen as long as 16 months under the same program, working throughout their courses and their program at school. If I could get into a few details about how the student work placement program works, it supplies the employer with a wage subsidy between 50 and 70% of the student's wages, up to a maximum of $5,000 or $7,000. So it can be quite effective, like I said, especially if you take it over each 4-month period. We also have, and of course, like I said earlier, sorry, each student will have access to those online training courses. The requirements for the student is that they need to be Canadian citizen or permanent resident, or have refugee status, because these are federal funds. For the employer, they need to be providing a bioeconomy function or be a bioeconomy employer themselves. I often joke that means an obvious bioeconomy employer would be a pharmaceutical company, as an example, because they're working in the biohealth industry. We also cover agrobiotech, bioindustrial, and biofuels. Or it could be a bioeconomy function, so a science student analyzing the yeast at a brewery, not traditionally known as a bioeconomy employer. So the world is your oyster when you're looking for these kinds of opportunities as both an employer or a student. And we do offer other wage subsidies outside of the student work placement program. Sometimes for graduates, we might offer the Career Starter program. It's currently closed, but it is one that has been offered in the past, as well as Science Horizons and the Student Science and Technology Internship program as well. which offer different kinds of facets and different kinds of focuses. But I do encourage all talent to look on our website or contact us here at BioTalent Canada to see what's available. As I mentioned, if you're doing your homework and you know you want to work at Nicoya Life, find out what they're hiring for, find out what subsidies are available, and it makes you just 10 times more attractive.
That's great, Joanne. It's just great to know that there's these resources there to help. And both of our other panelists have accessed BioTalent programs as well. So that's great. Thank you. So I'm just looking at some questions in the panel here. Sorry, in the Q&A section. There is a question here. How do you attract the right talent to the role? How can companies looking to hire in lower paying jobs compete? I will maybe pass that over to Jeannie, but I could also give my own kind of feedback there and speak a little bit going back to the values aspect. If the wage you don't think is necessarily competitive, really focusing on the work that you're doing and how it matters and really appealing to the values of candidates is really one way to set yourself apart. And we know also from the students that we have that is something that matters almost more than job stability and other factors that maybe previous generations found as a bit more important. And we do have a comprehensive survey and results on our website as well that really kind of outlines where a student's rated even compensation, which is maybe a bit lower than people think. But there are various other things that you can do to really position yourself. And maybe I'll stop there and let Jeannie answer this one as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I absolutely support what you just said. But when you look at it from the student's perspective, right, their main mission is, where am I going to, yes, the wage is important to everybody. That's a factor for sure. But like we had spoken about before, it's also about aligning it to their values and making it a fun place, right? They want to be with like-minded people. They want to be with other individuals who are bright, who are energetic, right? And so we haven't done this yet, but it's something that we are working on. So when our last cohort of co-ops left, we had them write just a little thing about just their experience with us, right? So we will start to put that on our career page. We'll start to do more of that on LinkedIn so that we're profiling. It's about your employer brand, right? It's about elevating your employer brand to entice those people to at least look in the window, because once you can get them in and once you can actually talk to them and bring your own level of excitement into that conversation, you will draw them in because they want to be able to work in a place where they are going to be respected. They're not going to be given those minimal kind of co-op tasks that you actually want to, and create a win-win situation. But it also just starts with your employer brand and how are you appealing and making that an environment that looks interesting and looks fun and looks like a place that co-op wants to be, right? The compensation and everything that comes in secondary, but they also want to be at a place where they can go back and brag to their friends and say, hey, guess what? I just did my co-op at wherever and it was awesome and this is why, right? And so it's just shifting your mindset on looking at it through the lens of a co-op, I think.
So there's another question here. What are some useful resources for employers to gauge what the salary expectations for different positions may be? With the high levels of inflation we are currently experiencing, it is difficult to know what is appropriate. And Joanne has got an answer. There we go.
I do. One of the projects we have is a national compensation guide that we put out each and every year, which follows along with the national occupational standards that we have. So it's going to increase to the 52 positions we have the national occupational standards designed for. And we do put that out once a year. So that's one way at any rate.
And I will say, from the co-op student perspective, we do publish annual earnings and average earnings by faculty and work term. So you can always, from a co-op perspective, you can check and see what wages are paid to students in that space. But for any other roles, Joanne's answer is probably the best one. Thank you for that.
And for us, we also use TechEdge. It's a market, external market, more for your full-time, doesn't incorporate co-ops, but we would use that as well.
Great, thank you. I do have a question asking me to post the website to access the survey and results. I think that you are referring to the student values survey, which I will do. I just need to find that while we're still on the call here. And I'm just looking to see if we have any other questions.
I'm going to go back to the last question also.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
just while you're looking.
Sure.
Because I also think a great way to entice co-ops, right? If you're looking at it, looking at trying to implement a program and you've never done it before, get involved with your university. Get your name out there, right? Let them see you. Think of things that you can do outside. Pair with another organization and do something for the co-ops so that you actually, again, start to elevate your brand, start to get your name out there, and start to make your organization the place that co-ops want to be.
Great. Thank you for that, Jeannie. Another question here, has anyone hired students other than just science students? So support roles like marketing or data analysis. I think, Jeannie, you touched on this a little bit already. Maybe you want to take this one on again?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of different roles. So we've had roles in finance, we've had like roles in the software hardware, we've had research assistants. We were looking at marketing and HR just recently, but we just didn't get everything together in time to hit this last round, but absolutely, and not even just not at Nicoya. Like when I look at past experience, right, through OpenText, through ApplyBoard, we certainly hired different co-ops in different positions as well. But they're no different. I think the talent coming out of the university is fantastic. Some of the thinking out of the box that is generated when you bring a co-op in, regardless of which business function they sit in, can be really, really valuable.
Trevor, do you are you hiring? Do you want to talk a little bit about your hiring as well? Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. So first I want to say that science students can actually do quite a bit that you might not. In our experience, we've hired almost exclusively science graduates from Waterloo, from Guelph, and from Laurier. And sometimes things just happen where we discover that they have a flair for marketing or for business development. And they come at it with already a really great background in science. So that's something that's really worked well for us. It's not going to work well for all organizations, but we're going with that because it seems to be something that's falling in place really well.
Great, thank you. Yes, science students can do lots. I was a science student and I wasn't only just for doing lab work. So I am really looking at the time here. So I think we're probably going to conclude. So thank you so much to our panelists for your time today and sharing your insights into hiring into this very difficult economy right now. You shared some very valuable tips, insights, and resources for a life sciences talent strategy. And thank you to everyone attending. And for more information about the University of Waterloo Co-op, please look for the post-webinar email that'll include some links and some contact information, as well as a link to the recording from today. So I am now going to pass it over to Dr. Jason Field, President of Life Sciences Ontario, for closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you to all of our speakers today. I really appreciate you taking the time for this very important topic. Carolyn, it's always a pleasure to host my alma mater at one of our LSO events. I am a product of the University of Waterloo co-op program. I don't know if that's the endorsement that you were hoping for, but I can say in the 100 years since I was a graduate from the Waterloo program, it's continued to improve and accelerate and evolve exponentially over time, and it's graduating some great quality students through that co-op program. If we can go to the next slide, our upcoming events. So this is National Biotech Week, and we've been doing our annual roadshow. Today we were in London, Ontario, and tomorrow we're actually going to be in Simcoe County, and we'll be wrapping up on Friday in Ottawa. Our webinar series is also going to continue in October with a very special event that we're hosting with Denmark. And we will be having representatives from Ontario and Quebec, and to talk about best practices in the development of a robust life sciences strategy. So we're going to have the international as well as the provincial perspectives on these strategies. That's going to be a lead-in to our big event that's happening on November 3rd. This is our policy forum, which has been rebranded as our Ideas to Action Life Sciences Forum. And it really is focused on taking these ideas and concepts that we talk so often about, and how do we turn that into real implementation. So please register for that event. It's going to be a great lineup of speakers. I'm actually really excited about the agenda. It's coming together quite nicely. So please take a look at that. Our LSO Award nominations are open until October 3rd, which I believe is on Monday. So not a lot of time. If you know of some exceptional individuals, companies, please submit nominations. These are very important awards, and we really rely on our community to provide these nominations. It's very easy to fill out a nomination. You can find them on our website. You don't have to fill out for all categories. If you just have like a Company of the Year or a Lifetime Achievement Award winner that you'd like to nominate, please put that nomination in through our website. And finally, I want to thank all of our sponsors and supporters, our platinum sponsors, which are listed here, as well as our gold sponsors. And thank you, special thanks to BioTalent Canada, one of our gold sponsors, our silver sponsors shown here. And thank you all for attending today's session. Special thank you again to my alma mater, University of Waterloo, and please have a great day. Look forward to seeing you all again real soon.